Mercedes-Benz just detonated a shockwave across the global auto industry, and the fallout is moving faster than anyone expected. What looked like a quiet strategy shift has now turned into a full-scale disruption that has competitors scrambling behind closed doors. This is not a concept tease, not a future promise, and not a rumor. This is Mercedes making a decisive move that threatens pricing, technology, and brand positioning across the entire premium car market. For decades, Mercedes-Benz sat comfortably at the top, protected by luxury margins and brand loyalty. But behind the scenes, something changed. Sales data started flashing warnings. EV adoption slowed. Buyers began questioning whether premium prices still made sense. And instead of retreating, Mercedes chose to attack. The company just tore up its old rulebook and replaced it with a strategy that nobody saw coming. Mercedes has now slashed pricing across key models in a way that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Vehicles that once felt financially out of reach are suddenly appearing within striking distance of mainstream buyers. This is not a clearance sale. This is a recalibration of what luxury means in 2025. And it sends a dangerous message to rivals who depend on high margins to survive. At the same time, Mercedes is doubling down on technology in a way that directly challenges Tesla, BMW, and even Silicon Valley. Advanced driver assistance systems that were once locked behind premium trims are now being pushed into broader lineups. Software upgrades, AI-driven dashboards, and next-generation battery efficiency are no longer optional extras. Mercedes is turning tech into a standard weapon, not a luxury add-on. Dealers are reportedly stunned. Some are thrilled by the surge in showroom traffic, while others are nervous about how this shift will affect long-term profitability. Used car values are already wobbling. Lease residuals are being quietly reassessed. The ripple effects are spreading far beyond Mercedes showrooms, hitting banks, insurers, and competitors who were not prepared for this level of aggression. What makes this move even more explosive is the timing. The global car market is already under pressure from rising interest rates, cautious consumers, and intense EV competition from China. Mercedes chose this exact moment to strike, forcing rivals to make impossible choices, cut prices and bleed margins, or hold the line and risk losing customers permanently. Inside the industry, executives are openly worried. BMW cannot ignore this. Audi cannot sit still. Lexus cannot rely on reputation alone anymore. Mercedes just reset expectations, and once consumer perception shifts, it is nearly impossible to reverse. Buyers are now asking a dangerous question. If Mercedes can offer this much value, why should anyone pay more elsewhere? And this is where the real shock begins, because pricing and technology are only the opening move. There are clear signals that Mercedes is preparing something even bigger, something that could redefine how luxury cars are built, sold, and updated over time. Supply chains are being reshuffled, production priorities are changing, internal investments are moving away from legacy strategies that once defined the brand. The most unsettling part for competitors is that this does not look like desperation. It looks calculated, deliberate, and confident. Mercedes is not reacting to the market, it is trying to control it. And when a brand with this much history and influence decides to go on the offensive, the entire industry feels it. Consumers may be celebrating, but behind the scenes, panic is starting to grow. Analysts are revising forecasts, dealers are rewriting sales strategies, rival brands are being forced into emergency meetings. The question now is not whether this will impact the car market, but how deep the damage will go. Because if Mercedes continues down this path, the traditional luxury hierarchy may not survive at all, and the next move could push the market past a point of no return, especially as new models, new pricing tiers, and unexpected partnerships begin to surface in ways no one is fully prepared for. Behind closed doors, the conversations are getting far more intense. Mercedes is no longer speaking like a company protecting its legacy. It is speaking like a company positioning for dominance in a radically different future. Internal briefings suggest this shift is not temporary and not limited to one market. Europe, the US, and even traditionally price-sensitive regions are all being pulled into the same strategic orbit. What truly rattles the industry is how coordinated this move appears. Pricing changes are lining up with production adjustments, software rollouts, and platform upgrades in a way that leaves very little room for competitors to respond. Mercedes is compressing timelines that normally stretch over years into months, forcing rivals into reactive mode while it keeps moving forward. Even more alarming is the impact on electric vehicles. Mercedes is no longer chasing Tesla's playbook, it is rewriting it. Battery cost reductions, improved range efficiency, and faster charging capabilities are being integrated without pushing prices upward. That combination is toxic for competitors who who are already struggling to make EVs profitable. If Mercedes can scale this approach, it threatens to expose structural weaknesses across the entire EV sector. Then there is the psychological shift among buyers. The Mercedes badge now represents not just prestige, but strategic value. Consumers who once viewed the brand as aspirational but unrealistic are suddenly reconsidering. This is pulling demand away from both luxury rivals and upper-tier mainstream brands, creating pressure from both sides of the market. Dealership behavior is already changing. Incentives are being restructured, sales training is being updated to focus less on exclusivity and more on technological superiority and long-term ownership value. That alone signals how serious this pivot is. Mercedes is no longer selling status first, it is selling justification. Suppliers are also feeling the shock. When a manufacturer of this size changes direction, entire ecosystems adjust. Parts manufacturers, software partners, logistics firms, and even raw material providers are being forced to renegotiate terms and scale faster than planned. This kind of movement usually happens during crises, not during calculated expansions. Meanwhile, competitors are trapped. If they follow Mercedes and cut prices, profitability collapses. If they hold firm, market share erodes. There is no clean exit. This is the kind of squeeze that reshapes industries, and history shows that not every brand survives it. And yet, Mercedes seems prepared for the consequences. Cost structures are being optimized. Legacy inefficiencies are being stripped away. The company is betting that volume, technology leadership, and brand trust will outweigh the short-term pain. It is a gamble, but one that only a few global automakers are even capable of attempting. The unsettling reality is that this move could normalize a new standard where luxury is no longer defined by price, but by capability and intelligence. If that happens, the traditional premium ladder collapses, and the entire car market is forced to rebuild itself from the ground up. And as this strategy unfolds, subtle signs suggest that Mercedes is still holding something back, something not yet fully revealed, something that could escalate this disruption even further as new announcements, new platforms, and unexpected shifts begin to align. What makes this moment even more dangerous for the industry is the silence coming from Mercedes leadership. There is no loud victory lap, no overhyped press tour, just controlled execution. That silence is deliberate. It suggests confidence. And in the auto world, confidence backed by scale is often the most destabilizing force of all. Insiders are now pointing to upcoming platform decisions that could rewrite manufacturing economics. Mercedes appears to be consolidating architectures in a way that allows combustion, hybrid, and electric models to share far more components than before. That means lower costs, faster rollouts, and the ability to pivot production almost instantly based on demand. Competitors locked into single-path EV platforms are suddenly exposed. The software angle is becoming impossible to ignore. Mercedes is treating software not as an accessory, but as the core of the vehicle. Over-the-air updates are expanding beyond infotainment into performance tuning, efficiency optimization, and driver assistance refinement. That creates a living product that improves after purchase, quietly undermining brands still selling static hardware. This also changes resale dynamics. If a Mercedes can gain features and performance over time, depreciation curves flatten. That impacts leasing, financing, and fleet decisions across the market. Banks and leasing companies are already adjusting models, and those adjustments ripple outward into consumer affordability and monthly payment structures. There is growing tension among rival executives because this strategy attacks multiple pressure points at once. Pricing hurts margins, technology raises expectations, software alters ownership economics, and all of it is wrapped in a brand consumers already trust. This is not a single punch, it is a sustained assault. The global implications are massive. Chinese manufacturers pushing aggressive EV pricing now face a European luxury giant willing to compete on value. American automakers trying to defend domestic market share are suddenly fighting on two fronts. Even Japanese brands known for reliability are being forced to reconsider how much technology they can afford to include without breaking their cost models. Perhaps the most uncomfortable truth is that Mercedes is doing this from a position of strength. It still commands loyalty, still dominates in key segments, and still carries a reputation built over generations. When a company like that chooses disruption over protection, it sends a warning that the old equilibrium is already broken. And as more data comes in, it becomes clear this is not about one quarter or one product cycle. This is about about redefining how value is measured in the car market. The companies that fail to adapt quickly enough may not just lose sales, they may lose relevance entirely, because once consumers reset their expectations around what a premium car should deliver for the price, there is no going back, and the next phase of this transformation is already taking shape as Mercedes quietly prepares to push even further. The pressure is now shifting from speculation to real-world consequences. Showrooms are reporting changes in buyer behavior that would have been unthinkable before. Customers are walking in armed with comparisons, asking direct questions about software updates, battery longevity, and long-term value rather than just leather quality or badge prestige. That shift favors Mercedes almost perfectly. This is also beginning to expose weaknesses in competitor messaging. Brands that relied heavily on heritage and emotional appeal are struggling to justify higher prices when Mercedes is offering measurable advantages. Marketing narratives are being rewritten on the fly, but perception moves faster than advertising, and right now, perception is slipping out of their control. Fleet buyers are paying close attention. Corporate clients, ride-hailing services, and premium mobility operators see an opportunity to upgrade quality without exploding costs. If Mercedes captures even a small portion of this segment, volume dynamics change dramatically, putting even more strain on competitors already facing overcapacity issues. The labor impact cannot be ignored either. As Mercedes streamlines platforms and integrates software more deeply, workforce requirements shift. Traditional roles are being redefined, while demand for software engineers and data specialists surges. This creates internal transformation pressure that many legacy automakers are not structurally prepared to handle. Financial markets are reacting in subtle but meaningful ways. Investor sentiment is recalibrating around which automakers can survive margin compression and still innovate. Mercedes is signaling that it believes scale and efficiency will win, even in a lower margin environment. That belief alone influences capital flows and long-term valuation assumptions across the sector. What unsettles rivals most is the speed. Industry changes typically unfold slowly, giving companies time to adjust. Mercedes is compressing the cycle. Decisions that once took years are now happening in quarters. This pace leaves little room for mistakes and no room for hesitation. Meanwhile, consumers are beginning to normalize what would have once been considered extraordinary. Features that felt futuristic just months ago are now expected. The bar has been raised, and once that bar moves, it never returns to its old position. And as this new reality sets in, more indicators suggest that Mercedes has not yet revealed the full scope of its plan. Strategic investments, supply agreements, and internal restructuring hint at another phase still waiting to be unleashed, one that could deepen the disruption even further as the market braces for what comes next. The industry is now entering a phase where denial is no longer an option. Competitors are being forced to confront uncomfortable math. Cost structures built for high-margin luxury models simply do not work when a dominant player decides to compress prices and scale aggressively. This is not a theoretical threat anymore. It is showing up in quarterly reports, inventory levels, and dealer incentives. Mercedes is also reshaping expectations around ownership experience. Service intervals, digital diagnostics, and predictive maintenance are being woven into the product story. That reduces downtime, increases trust, and quietly lowers total cost of ownership. For buyers, this makes the decision feel less risky. For competitors, it adds another layer they must now match. What is especially disruptive is how Mercedes is aligning design with efficiency. The brand is moving away from purely ornamental luxury and toward functional elegance. Aerodynamics, lightweight materials, and modular interiors are no longer engineering footnotes. They are selling points. This resonates with a new generation of buyers who value intelligence over excess. The knock-on effects extend into the used car market. When new Mercedes models offer more value up front, used pricing dynamics shift. This affects trade-ins, leasing strategies, and residual forecasting across the industry. Dealers who fail to adapt quickly could find themselves exposed in ways they did not anticipate. Regulators and policymakers are also watching closely. A luxury automaker pushing affordability and efficiency at scale changes emissions trajectories, safety benchmarks, and compliance strategies. Mercedes is effectively influencing the regulatory conversation simply through execution, not lobbying. Perhaps the most telling sign is the internal momentum. Employees, partners, and suppliers are reportedly aligned around this new direction. That kind of cohesion is rare during periods of transformation, and it suggests leadership has committed fully, not halfway. For rivals, the problem is no longer whether Mercedes will pull back. The problem is assuming it will. Every signal points to sustained pressure, sustained investment, and sustained ambition. Waiting this out may be the most dangerous strategy of all. As the market absorbs these shifts, one reality becomes unavoidable. The traditional definitions of luxury, performance, and value are being rewritten in real time, and the brands that fail to evolve alongside this shift may find themselves permanently displaced as Mercedes continues to push deeper into territory once considered untouchable. Now the conversation is moving into areas that used to be off limits for premium brands. Subscription models, flexible ownership plans, and software-based feature activation are no longer experiments. They are becoming core components of Mercedes' strategy. This gives the company recurring revenue while giving consumers flexibility, a balance most automakers have failed to achieve. This shift also tightens customer lock-in. When a vehicle's capabilities evolve through software and services, switching brands becomes more costly and less attractive. Mercedes is not just selling cars anymore, it is building an ecosystem. Competitors who still rely on one-time vehicle sales are suddenly at a structural disadvantage. The competitive gap widens when you consider global reach. Mercedes can deploy this strategy simultaneously across markets, adjusting pricing and features region by region without rewriting the entire product. That agility is devastating for smaller brands and even uncomfortable for large ones with fragmented portfolios. Another critical pressure point is innovation cadence. Mercedes is signaling that it will update faster than traditional model cycles allow. Minor refreshes, digital upgrades, and efficiency gains can roll out continuously. This undermines the old rhythm of the industry, where competitors counted on long gaps between major launches to catch up. The cultural impact inside rival companies is already visible. Engineers are being pushed harder. Marketing teams are scrambling for new narratives. Finance departments are warning of shrinking buffers. When stress appears simultaneously across departments, strategic errors become more likely. What makes this even more unsettling is consumer trust. Mercedes is not asking buyers to believe in an unknown future. It is delivering tangible changes now. That builds credibility quickly, and credibility compounds. Once earned, it becomes extremely difficult for competitors to counter. And as these layers stack on top of each other, the conclusion becomes harder to avoid. Mercedes is not simply responding to market pressure, it is exploiting it. Volatility, uncertainty, and transition are being used as leverage to reposition the brand at the center of the next automotive era. With every passing month, the room for rivals to maneuver gets smaller, and the momentum behind this transformation keeps accelerating, suggesting that the most disruptive phase of this strategy may still be unfolding just beyond the horizon. At this stage, even long-standing assumptions about brand hierarchy are starting to crack. Mercedes was once the benchmark others chased. Now it is the aggressor, forcing the entire market to react on its terms. That reversal alone changes the psychological balance of the industry, and psychology often dictates outcomes as much as engineering does. What is unfolding is not a price war in the traditional sense. It is a value war. Mercedes is redefining what buyers should expect at every price point it touches. Once those expectations are set, competitors must either match them or explain why they cannot. Most explanations sound like excuses to consumers. This strategy also exposes fragility in brands that lean too heavily on EV hype without building sustainable economics. When a legacy giant like Mercedes proves that advanced technology and competitive pricing can coexist, it strips away the narrative safety net others depended on. The global supply chain is being quietly reshaped in response. Battery suppliers, chip manufacturers, and software vendors are prioritizing partners that can scale reliably. Mercedes' moves signal long-term volume and stability, making it an increasingly attractive anchor customer. That advantage compounds over time and further distances it from rivals. Dealers are now making strategic choices of their own. Floor space, marketing budgets, and customer outreach are being reallocated based on where momentum is strongest. Once those shifts happen, reversing them is difficult. Market presence becomes self-reinforcing. Perhaps the most dangerous consequence for competitors is normalization. What feels shocking today becomes become standard tomorrow. Features, pricing, and ownership models that once triggered headlines will soon be expected. When disruption becomes normal, laggards are exposed instantly. As this normalization accelerates, the window for strategic course correction narrows. Decisions delayed today become liabilities tomorrow. Mercedes understands this dynamic and is pressing its advantage while others hesitate. And as more pieces fall into place, it becomes increasingly clear that this transformation is building towards something larger, something that could lock in Mercedes' position for years, especially as the next wave of announcements, partnerships, and product shifts begin to surface in ways the market has not fully priced in yet. So the real question is no longer what Mercedes-Benz just did, but what happens next. Because once a company of this scale decides to tear down old rules and rewrite them in real time, there is no easy reset for the rest of the industry. The shockwaves are already spreading, and the consequences will not be evenly distributed. Some brands will adapt, others will struggle, and a few may not survive this shift at all. Mercedes has forced the market into motion, and motion favors the prepared, not the comfortable. If you want to understand where the car industry is truly heading, this moment will be studied for years. What looks like a pricing move today may end up being the pivot point that changed luxury, technology, and value forever. Stay locked in, because as Mercedes continues to push forward, the next developments could arrive faster and hit harder than anyone expects.